Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you got guesswork. Please, guys, participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a man called Peter, who is calling about a used car, and a woman called Tina, who is selling the car. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
Hi, it's Peter speaking. I'm calling about the ad you put online for a used car.
Sorry, what was your name again?
Oh, sorry, it's Peter Smith.
Oh, hi, I'm Tina. Good to hear from you. So tell me, which car are you after?
I'm interested in the sedan, the 2012 Toyota sedan.
We have a few of those available right now. Let's see. Was it the Black Pearl one? Or maybe the Barcelona red one?
Oh yes, I saw the red one, but I don't really like red cars. The one I'm after is silver.
Right, I see. Okay. Well, what would you like to know?
Well, it says in the ad that it's in good condition. What does that mean exactly?
Well, the paint is original. There are almost no scratches or dents. It looks like a new car, in fact. There was a tiny scratch on the door, but we polished that right out for you.
Oh, that's good. How's the engine?
The engine? Ah, yes. Well, there haven't been any problems, and it's been serviced regularly. You know, oil changes, lubes, and so on. The previous owner was a very careful old lady, and she looked after it. It's only had the one driver. Oh, except that on the papers it says 2 owners because her son took over the ownership when the old lady stopped driving.
How about the tyres? Are they in good condition? I do a lot of driving on the open road.
Well, they all passed the car safety test. You might need to replace the back ones in the next 6 months or so because they're a bit worn. But the owner had the front 2 replaced only a couple of months ago. So those ones are new. You won't need to replace them for ages. Oh, and it had new brake linings recently too. I have the garage receipts for all of those things.
Okay, that's good. And what extras does it have?
Well, air conditioning, of course. And there's a nice stereo which plays CDs. Or you can use it with an MP3 player. What else? All the usuals: power steering, central locking, ABS brakes. Oh, and it also has a tow bar. You can remove that and store it inside the car when you're not using it. What else? You know it's manual transmission, right?
Yes, I don't want an automatic. And the tow bar sounds great. I need that for carrying my bike. Okay, well, that all sounds very cool. And you're asking $25,000, is that right?
No way. I think you must have the wrong ad. This one is 30,000 and we won't go lower than that.
I see. What's the mileage again?
Most cars of that age would be around 80,000 kilometres, or even up to 120,000. But as I said, the old lady didn't drive much, so it's very low. Only 50,000. You won't get a better low mileage car than this one.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Okay, well, I'd like to come and see it if that's all right. Where do you live?
I'm in the suburb of Pembrose. Do you know where that is?
Sorry, can you say that again? I'll just check on my GPS.
Yes, I'm in Pembrose at 352 Hunter Place. Hunter.
Oh yes, I see. Yes, that's okay. It's about 30 minutes drive from here. No, that's no problem.
So, when would you like to come?
How about this evening? I could come at 5 p.m. Oh, no, sorry, I forgot about my gym class. How about 6:30? Does that suit you?
Look, sorry, I have someone else coming then. Can you make it a bit later? Say 7:30?
Well, okay then. But that's getting a bit late really, and it'll be dark by then, won't it? I'd really like to see the car in daylight if that's okay.
Well then, how about 4ish?
Yes, that's good. Okay, let's say 4:30 p.m. And I guess I'll just have to be late for the gym. I'm usually very punctual, so being late just once won't matter too much.
Yes, fine. See you then. Oh, just in case there's a problem, what's your mobile number?
Oh, of course. It's 093678192. Ignore that. It's my landline. Of course, it makes more sense to give you my mobile. That's 045 352 7652.
Got that? Excellent. See you later, Peter.
Yes, sure. Bye, Tina.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You are going to hear a tutor talking to a group of philosophy students. First, look at questions 11 to 13.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Dr. Russell, and I am your tutor for philosophy this year. I think we're all here. Let's see, 5, 6, 7. Yes, that's everyone. Before we look at the 3 lectures you've had on philosophy this week, I would just like to run through a few things about what you can expect of me as tutor and what in turn we expect of you. As for myself, my function as tutor is to help you in all things relating to your work in the philosophy course. The help that I am able to give is, of course, mainly academic. For personal matters, I can refer you to other support services in the university, ranging from counselling to welfare. One thing that I would point out is that if you feel that you need to talk to someone, no matter how insignificant it is, don't leave it. Oh, and the last thing is, if you do need to make an appointment, the times are listed on the door of my room. You just write your name in a time slot. But I would point out that the appointment slots get booked up quite quickly. If it's urgent, catching me between sessions is the best idea. That way we can sort something out quickly. No questions?
Before the talk continues, look at questions 14 to 20.
OK. As regards you as students, the tutorials are voluntary. You're not obliged to attend, but you are encouraged to do so. Last year, for the first time, a register was kept of students attending lectures, and this year tutors are being asked to keep a register of tutorial attendance. This is not a formal register, and not all tutors will be doing it, but in the philosophy department, all of us have chosen to keep registers. Another point that's being emphasised this year is punctuality. When we did exit questionnaires, we found that people arriving late for tutorials and lectures was the single most annoying thing for the majority of students. I would therefore ask you to try to be on time for the tutorials, and for all your other classes for that matter. As regards the tutorials themselves, we will have a review of the philosophy lectures of the week before, with the discussion being led by one of you each week. There is, of course, some planning involved, but you should rely primarily on the notes you made at the lectures. This will not take up the whole of the 90 minutes allocated to the tutorial. For the rest of the time, we will look at a particular philosopher, period or concept for which you will be expected to do some preparation each week. This will range from reading about a particular individual or concept to preparing a brief outline on a subject of your choice. How much you put into this depends on you, but we're not expecting in-depth analysis at this stage. Are there any questions so far?
I'd just like to ask whether the work we do in the tutorials counts towards our continuous assessment, and if so, how much?
I was just coming on to that point. All the work you do in the way of essays and project work that is graded counts towards your continuous assessment grades. The mini presentations and lecture discussions will not be graded, but obviously, as time goes on, these activities will, I hope, have an impact on your work, and hence your scores. Does that answer your question?
Basically, yes, but...
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear two students talking to their tutor about a geography trip. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Now, Stefan and Lauren, you worked together on the assignment for your urban geography course, didn't you? I know you made a plan of what you were going to do before you went on the field trip. Did you stick to it?
More or less.
OK. So where did you start?
Well, first of all, we selected one area of the city to work in. We decided on the centre. And we looked in detail at how it has been developed by doing a survey.
Yeah, we did that by walking round and dividing the area into different categories, such as residential, commercial and industrial, so we could record land use. We're going to find some maps from 50 years ago and from 100 years ago, so we can look at what has changed.
Good. So that gives you a foundation. Then what did you do?
I was interested in looking at how polluted the city was.
I thought that was too general a topic and would be difficult to check. But Stefan persuaded me, and actually it was quite interesting, because before we started, we assumed that a lot of the pollution problems would be caused by industry.
In fact, most of the industrial development has been on the outskirts.
Oh.
And most pollution is caused by the traffic which passes through the city centre every day.
Right.
There are 5 major road junctions around the edge of the city, so we set up equipment to check the air quality on each of those 3 times on one day.
In the morning and evening, which is when most journeys are made in and out of the city, and at 2:30 in the afternoon.
On the same day, we went to the 2 busiest junctions in the morning and evening to calculate the traffic flow into the city.
Right.
We'll be able to produce some graphs from the figures we collected.
Yeah.
Presumably you then looked at where all these cars ended up.
I thought we should look at why people were coming into the city, whether it was for employment or education or leisure activities. But Stefan thought that would be too difficult.
Because most people were in cars, it would be hard to ask them.
Yeah.
So we decided to spend an afternoon examining the parking facilities available instead. We established the capacity of each car park, and we spent an afternoon counting cars in and out, so we have an idea of how long people spend in the city centre.
So, do you have evidence that most journeys are made by car within the city centre?
We checked local government statistics to see if that was true, but they were inconclusive.
Everything is quite close together in the city centre, and there are wide pavements, so you would expect people to walk from one place to another.
So we chose a number of locations and we noted how many pedestrians passed a particular spot.
How did you choose where to do that?
Oh, we stood at 2 places in the business district. One in the shopping area, and the other was in an area where there are more tourists.
Right.
I thought it was really important to talk to people, so we carried out a survey on how people usually travelled into the city. We asked them about their usual means of transport.
We found out that it varied according to why people were travelling. If they were employed in the city, they wanted to get there quickly, but if they were coming in for their leisure time, they didn't mind using the bus.
That's all we had time for while we were there.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
OK. So, shall we talk about what you're going to do next and how you're going to divide the tasks up? How are you going to present the data you've got?
Well, some of the information can be presented as graphs or maps.
I'm quite good at the software.
You'd better do that then, Lauren. I'll help you check all the statistics before you start.
OK.
It's good to present as much as you can visually. Is there anything else you can use as visuals?
We've got a lot of photographs which we can go through.
We both took them, so some will be duplicated. It's going to take ages to go through them all. Maybe one of us should just choose some.
It's better if you collaborate. That way you'll end up with the best of what you've got.
That's fine. We'll do that.
And when the graphs and maps are done, you'll need to write a report, an analysis of the data. Will you do that together?
I think that should be my responsibility if we're going to share the work out evenly. I can use some of Lauren's notes as well as my own.
OK. And finally, you'll be presenting your project to the rest of the group in a couple of weeks' time.
We thought it'd be better for Stefan to do that, as he's got more experience at that kind of thing.
I would prefer to have input from both of you, as I have to do an assessment.
Oh.
We'll take turns then. We'll divide it into sections and talk about a few things each.
Good. You'll find it easier, Lauren, than doing a presentation on your own. Well, if you need to ask me any more questions while you're working on this, email me. I look forward to seeing what you produce.
Thanks.
The end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear a lecturer giving the beginning of a talk on the history of British pottery. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Thank you for coming to this series of talks. Before I talk in detail about the experiments and innovations of the British ceramicists, I'd like to give you a summary of the social and manufacturing background in which they lived and worked. So, we're talking about England, or more specifically, the region known as the Midlands. And we need to go back mainly to the 18th century and briefly even earlier to put it in a global context. Now, at that period, the majority of the population, whatever their station in life, as you might say, were dependent for their living, in one way or another, not on the geographical location of where they lived, but on the physical characteristics of the actual land they lived on. This is true whether we're talking about the aristocracy, the owners of great estates who incidentally had no snobbery about the concept of making money from all the reserves of coal or timber or stone on their rolling acres, or the farmers making a fat living from the rich soils. And besides these groups, and the less affluent ones, the deposits of iron ore and lead, the limestone and flint, and the brown and yellow clays also sustained the numerous industries in the area. It's important to recognise that it was already an industrial region and had been so for centuries. There were many Midland trades, some of them indigenous, some of them not. For example, there were immigrants from France who came as early as the late 16th century, and they were producers of glass. A century later, there is plenty of evidence that the variety of trades was enormous. There was brewing in Burton-on-Trent, silk weaving and ribbon making near Coventry, framework knitting around Nottingham, and of course in Cheshire men dug the salt, as we still do nowadays even, which in that era was sent downriver to the estuary of the Mersey. Now, among these well-established trades, one of the oldest of the local crafts was pottery. As you will probably be aware, ceramics has always been a mix of science, design and skill. And a good potter is, in a sense, an experimental chemist, trying out new mixes and glazes and needing to be alert to the impact of changes of temperature on different types of clay. For 200 years, up to the time we are concerned with, potters had been making butter pots and pitchers and patterned plates, using the clay which was plentiful in the area where they lived, in a handful of North Staffordshire villages dotted along the low hills. Now I want to explain a little about the industrial processes which had preceded the great breakthrough in Germany in 1708. That's when the formula for porcelain was discovered, a secret that had been held in China for 1,000 years. In the Midlands, in England as elsewhere, there had basically been two kinds of pottery. The first is still known as earthenware. Now, this was a bit rough and ready, but it was deservedly popular for several reasons. To start with, it was relatively cheap, so it could be used by most households. This was because it could be made from local clay without any complicated processing or added materials. From the potter's point of view, there was another reason for its cheapness. This was that it could be fired in simple ovens or kilns and at relatively low temperatures, so he didn't have to spend so much money on fuel to achieve the necessary heat. On the other hand, after one firing in the kiln, the problem with earthenware was that it remained porous, so had limited usefulness. So for most purposes, it had to go back in the kiln for a second firing before it became waterproof. And another thing was that it was extremely breakable. I mean, before it had even been sold. I suppose the potter wouldn't have minded so much if people just had to keep coming back for more every time they broke a jug or whatever. But it was very inconvenient because it meant there was a lot of wastage in the course of the manufacturing process. Anyway, for all these reasons, if people could afford it, and that would be all but the very poor, they would buy stoneware, a much tougher product. Now, for this, the potter used a slightly more expensive raw material, which was made by combining clay and flint, and this mixture was fired at a far higher heat, with the result that the ingredients vitrified. That is to say, in effect, the whole thing became glassy. And because of this, it was non-porous, and naturally this was regarded as a great advance. Well, that's the situation in the 18th century. Are there any questions at this stage? OK, so now we can go on to look at the age of innovation.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.